Exercise is important at any age with Dr. Ivan Molten.
Exercise, even of moderate intensity, is associated with retaining muscle strength, which is really important for things like transfers. It's associated with reducing blood sugar levels for most people, which is important for staving off things like type 2 diabetes. We talked about dyslipidemia, so it's good for that, sort of cholesterol balance. It's associated with lower risk of heart attack, lower risk of stroke, and it just keeps people with disabilities more independent longer. If you have done transfers your whole life a certain way, for example, say you're a wheelchair user, and as you get older you cease to exercise, your metabolism slows down, now you're putting on weight and you're less strong, so you're not going to be as able to do those chair-to-chair transfers. So it starts to really impact people's ability. And then the other thing I would say is that we know exercise is as good as antidepressants for treating mild to moderate depression. So that's the other reason that it's helpful. Oh, and bone density. Every reason. The question is not whether exercise is good, the question is how do we get people access to it? We know what the barriers are to exercise. It's not a mystery. We know about the environmental barriers for people who have disabilities. And we're not doing enough to change them, and we're not doing enough to address them. So we can keep studying this, but we know what the answer is. We know that people need exercise, that they can exercise, and that we can make exercise adaptable. We put a lot of pressure on the person with the disability, like, well, you should get exercise. We don't think enough about the environment that prevents them from exercising. And that's true of a lot of things. Exercising, socializing, working. We don't think about the broader sort of oppressive context that they're in. And I think that's just an important thing to remember. For people with disabilities, there are barriers to everything. Barriers to healthcare, barriers to exercise, barriers to community participation. And a lot of those are in the environment. There are things like sidewalks and curb cuts and transportation and buses and doctors' offices and all of that. That's a thing we need to address. We shouldn't tolerate that. And then other barriers are financial and the reality of the cost of healthcare for people with disabilities. But I think it's important that we remember that these barriers exist and not put everything on the person with the disability. You should exercise, you should do this, you should participate, you should work, whatever we're gonna say. If we don't think about the reality of the barriers that they're facing, we're blaming the wrong individual there.
NCHPAD, the National Center on Health, Physical Activity, and Disability, at www.nchpad.org.